Students, good morning. Today we are going to do a poem, 3 Years She Grew in Sun and Shower by William Wordsworth. William Wordsworth was born on 7th April 1770 and he died on 23rd April 1850, and he was an English romantic poet who, along with Samuel Taylor Coleridge, helped to launch the Romantic Age in English literature with their joint publication by the name of, or rather by the title of, Lyrical Ballads. Wordsworth's magnum opus is generally considered to be the Prelude, a semi-autobiographical poem of his early years that he revised and expanded later on with a number of lines, and equally at a number of times also. It was posthumously titled and published by his wife in the year of his death, before which it was generally known as the poem to Coleridge. Now, before moving on to the summary of the poem, we would like to go through the recitation of that. In poetry, recitation is important, so we will recite the poem. 3 years she grew in sun and shower. Okay, we start. 3 years she grew in sun and shower. Then nature said, a lovelier flower on earth was never sown. This child I to myself will take. She shall be mine, and I will make a lady of my own. Myself will to my darling be both law and impulse, and with me the girl in rock and plain, in earth and heaven, in glade and bower, shall feel an overseering power to kindle or restrain. She shall be sportive as the fawn, that wild with glee across the lawn or up the mountain springs, and hers shall be the breathing balm, and hers the silence and the calm of mute, insensate things. The floating clouds their state shall lend to her, for her the willow bend. Nor shall she fail to see, even in the motions of the storm, grace that shall mould the maiden's form by silent sympathy. The stars of midnight shall be dear to her, and she shall lean her ear in many a secret place, where rivulets dance their wayward round, and beauty born of murmuring sound shall pass into her face, and vital feelings of delight shall rear her form to stately height, her virgin bosom swell. Such thoughts to Lucy I will give, while she and I together live here in this happy dell. Thus nature spake, the work was done. How soon my Lucy's race was run! She died and left me this heath, this calm and quiet scene, the memory of what has been and never more will be. Okay, what is the general idea of this poem? Let me tell you one thing. William Wordsworth's poems have long confronted the sorrowful souls. His tone is not that of a typical tortured soul poet, yet he was not without immense suffering. His ability to infuse comfort into his pain through his poetry has offered peace and understanding to people for generations. He experienced some of the deepest pain any human being has ever known, the loss of a child. In this poem, 3 years she grew in sun and shower, he writes about Lucy, the character who represents his own daughter Catherine. She died at the age of 3 in the year 1812. She was a child that was known for making those around her laugh, and as her condition was referred to as convulsions, it is assumed that she suffered and died from polio. Wordsworth grieves, but not beyond hope. He writes his poem about Lucy. Perhaps it was too painful to use Catherine's name, but this poem quickly reveals that it is Catherine whom Wordsworth thinks about while writing this piece. In the first stanza, the speaker lets the reader identify with Lucy. It is not hard to imagine a lively young 3-year-old playing in the sun or in the rain, but she was too lovely for earth, or so nature decided. The speaker suggests that nature has taken the child for herself because she was actually too beautiful for the earth. We move on to stanza 2. Here, the speaker shifts to the thoughts of himself. He can easily see how nature wanted this little girl for herself, lovely as she was, but he himself would need to respond to this loss. When he says that he will be both law and impulse, He implies that he will react in the way he is expected to react and do the things which he is expected to do, but he would not reach without impulse. He would give way to his feelings and allow grief to have its way in his heart. He implies that as he walks the earth and as he looks into the heavens, he will feel her presence as an overseeing power, and he reveals that he will either kindle that feeling or restrain it, probably depending upon the time and circumstance in which that kind of a feeling arises in his soul, heart. Now, we shift on to the stanza 3. The speaker here shifts his tone, rather, the poet once again, in order to focus on her Lucy. He has explained what this loss means to nature and to himself. But what does it mean for Lucy? He finds his comfort in this. Lucy is symbolic of Wordsworth's daughter Catherine, who died of polio. The speaker believes that Lucy will be sportive, bubbly as the fawn, and able to run across the lawn as she was wild with glee. He believes that, contrary to her limited physical ability on earth, in a new place she would be able to enjoy running wild like a fawn. She would also enjoy the silence and the calm. The speaker finds comfort in this thought. We move on to the fourth stanza. In this stanza, the speaker continues to imagine what Lucy is now doing. He imagines her floating on the clouds and watching those on earth. He imagines that she should never fail to see the silent sympathy he feels for her. We move on to stanza 5. And here the speaker imagines that Lucy shall be dear even to the stars. He imagines that she is enjoying her existence as she moves about in the night, being loved by the stars and all the heavenly beings. In the next stanza, the speaker reveals his belief that although Lucy is no longer alive in earthly terms, she will still experience vital feelings of delight as she grows up into her stately height and into maturity. The imagery of her rearing her form to a stately height and of her virgin bosom swelling reveals his belief that wherever she is, where nature has taken her, she will continue to grow up there with all the feelings of life and vitality. He vows to give those thoughts to Lucy daily, so that even though she exists in a different domain than he is, they will still together live there in this happy dell. The next stanza, which is the final stanza, here the poet refers back to nature. Nature is the authority in this situation, and she has said that work was done and Lucy was no longer needed on earth. The speaker mourns over this, but he doesn't resent it. He exclaims, "How soon my Lucy's race was run!" And he is clearly grieving when he said she died and left to me this heath, this calm and quiet scene. This reveals that Lucy's absence in his life is felt deeply. The absence of her laugh is painfully noticeable, and he is left only with memories of the past. Although the stanza leading up to this final one speaks of Lucy living in a vital and fulfilling eternity, the speaker chooses to end 3 years she grew in sun and shower with the grief that he feels in knowing that what has been never more will be.